Go. All right, here we go again. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the Alzheimer's disease facts and figures for those of you who may not be aware of them. These are facts and figures from the Alzheimer's Association's 2024 Facts and Figures report. So you can see that nearly 7 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's. This is up. If you had seen our 2023 facts and figures before, we were at 6 million, and now we're at nearly 7 million. So the rise in the number of people with Alzheimer's is evident. The lifetime risk for Alzheimer's at age 45 is 1 in 5 for women and 1 in 10 for men. We also know that there are populations that are at higher risk for Alzheimer's, and that would be older Black Americans are 2 times as likely to have Alzheimer's or other dementia than whites, and older Hispanics are 1.5 times as likely to have Alzheimer's or other dementia than whites. Age is the greatest risk factor. 1 in 3 seniors dies with Alzheimer's or another form of dementia, and in fact, 1 in 3 individuals over age 85 will have some type of Alzheimer's or dementia. It kills more than breast cancer and prostate cancer combined. In fact, dementia is the 6th leading cause of death. Between 2000 and 2021, deaths from heart disease decreased by 2.1%, while deaths from Alzheimer's disease increased by 141%. So this is a disease that is affecting, I think you would probably say it affects everyone in some way, either a family member, a friend, just someone in the community that you know, someone that you know is caregiving for someone. I think we can almost all say we are touched by this disease in one way or another. Now, the mission of the Alzheimer's Association is that we are leading the way to end Alzheimer's and all other dementia. We do this by accelerating global research. We really focus on driving that risk reduction and that early detection. And we'll talk a little bit in a minute about why that is so important. And then we want to maximize quality care and support. And again, that is for everyone, in all populations and all communities. So to make sure we're all on the same page when we're talking about Alzheimer's and we're talking about dementia, I want to talk about dementia as an umbrella term. A lot of people ask me, what's the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? Is there a difference? Are they the same? You think about it this way. Dementia is an umbrella. It's a term that means loss of memory and other thinking abilities that interfere with our daily life. So that's interfering with our ability to get dressed or take our medications or plan a meal or drive. So anything that interferes with our daily living. Now, you see on the right side of the screen, there are different types of dementia. So there are many disease processes that lead to this loss of memory and thinking abilities. Alzheimer's is the #1 cause. 60 to 80% of all dementia is due to Alzheimer's. But you may have dementia. Someone could have dementia due to a vascular reason, maybe after a stroke or brain bleed. There is dementia that can go along with Parkinson's. There's Lewy body dementia, frontotemporal, and then there's mixed dementia that can be dementia from more than one cause. So just know that dementia is an umbrella term, and Alzheimer's is the greatest cause of dementia. So let's talk specifically a little bit right now about Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's is a brain disease. It causes problems, again, not just with memory, but with thinking and behavior. And I want people to remember that. We think of Alzheimer's as a memory problem, but it's also a thinking and behavior problem. We'll go into that a little bit more in a minute. As symptoms eventually grow severe enough, they're going to interfere with daily tasks. So as the disease progresses, individuals will probably need around-the-clock care. They're going to need someone there with them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for safety, for activities of daily living, like getting dressed and making meals and make sure they take their medications. All of those issues will need to be dealt with, that caregivers will need to deal with when someone has dementia. I already mentioned this, but again, know that there are populations at higher risk. Again, Black Americans are twice as likely as white Americans to have Alzheimer's or another dementia. Hispanic Americans are 1.5 times as likely to have the disease as white Americans, and almost 2/3 of Americans living with Alzheimer's are women. So it really does affect women in many ways.
Oh, wow.
There are what we call the Alzheimer's Association. We really like to talk about these 10 warning signs of dementia. It's important to know that as we all age, there are normal cognitive changes that happen to us, and that's normal. But there are some red flags that we encourage people to be aware of, and that if they notice these red flags about themselves or a loved one, or maybe an employee, it's, encourage the conversation, encourage someone to have the conversation with their physician. We're going to talk through these real quick in just a minute about what's normal and what's not as you look at the 10 categories. But let me tell you first why it's important to recognize these signs, even if you recognize one of these signs in yourself or someone else, to have the conversation. And that's because there are medical reasons out there, like thyroid problems or heart disease or depression. There are medical reasons that can cause people to mimic dementia. So let's say someone's thyroid is really off, they can have some cognitive issues that seem like dementia. So it's always good to go first have a talk with your primary care physician, because they're going to take a look at all those medical factors first. And they may say, your thyroid's off, we can fix that. Or you've got a urinary tract infection, we can fix that. So that's the one reason it's important to understand the warning signs and to talk to your physician. The other reason is, and I'll get to this in just a minute, there are new drug options out there now to help slow down the progression of the disease. But again, we need to catch it early. So being aware of these warning signs is very important. So real quickly, the first warning sign that we talk about is memory loss that disrupts daily life. Well, what might be normal? What's normal may be that I forget someone's name every once in a while. It doesn't come to me right away, but it does later. Okay, so that's not really disrupting my daily life. What might disrupt my daily life is if I can't remember how to button my shirt. So think about it that way. Memory loss that disrupts your daily life. It's normal to forget a name. It's normal to forget where we misplace things, but we can find them later. Another red flag might be thinking about challenges in planning or problem solving. I think of a red flag with this is at Christmas. I have a family member who has always been able to prepare for the holidays and for lots of people coming. And then all of a sudden she wasn't. She just couldn't walk through that planning of that large event anymore. That was just along the lines, that was just along with other warning signs, but that's just an example I can give for a red flag on that. We talk about difficulty completing familiar tasks. Well, what might be normal is if I get a new TV with a new remote and it takes me a while to figure it out. It takes me a while to figure out how to use that new microwave, that new device that I've gotten. But someone with dementia, when we talk about difficulty completing a familiar task, we're even looking at, maybe even having difficulty creating a grocery list or driving to a familiar place. So those are types of red flags. When we talk about with confusion with time or place, what's normal for me and what's normal for others is sometimes I don't remember. If I'm on vacation, I don't know what day it is necessarily because I'm on vacation and I am not thinking about it. But I know I can go to a calendar and go to my phone and I can figure it out. Someone with dementia, they're not going to be able to figure it out. They may not know the year. They may not know the season. And, you may see someone who's dressing for the winter when it's the summer, or for summer when it's winter, just really confusion about even the seasons of the year. And so there is a difference there in me forgetting what day it is on my vacation and someone who doesn't know the year, the time, or even the place where they are. Another warning sign is trouble understanding visual and spatial relationships. Well, normal changes might be that I might develop cataracts or glaucoma, which affects my vision. But someone with dementia or Alzheimer's may have difficulty with spatial relationships. And an example of that or visual images might be seeing themselves in a mirror and not recognizing that it's them. Maybe seeing someone else in a mirror and thinking they're outside looking in a window. So just really not understanding those images and relationships. And it can also have to do with images like on the floor patterns with our tile or our carpets. Those can be confusing as well. There's an example where I know a gentleman would not keep moving forward because there was a dark pattern on the carpet, and he perceived that as a hole in the ground. And so whenever people were urging him to move forward, he wouldn't do it, and he would get upset and he would get anxious, but it's because he thought it was a hole in the ground. So just things of that nature. Number 6, new problems with words in speaking or writing. Again, it's normal for me and it's normal for people to sometimes have trouble coming up with the word that you're looking for. But a normal, someone who's just having normal cognitive changes, it's going to come to them eventually. It might be a little while, but it's going to come to them. Someone with dementia or Alzheimer's who has trouble with speaking or writing, the words just don't come to them in the right order. It might be they have trouble stringing the words. Maybe that they can't find the word, but it also might be just stringing together words to make a comprehensive thought. So there is a difference. I talked a little bit a while ago about misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace your steps. Again, I may misplace my keys all the time. Maybe I'm coming in the house and I'm carrying a bunch of groceries, and so I just drop them in my purse as I come through the door instead of hanging them on the hook by the door, but I can retrace my steps and find them. Not only can someone with dementia usually not retrace their steps, but they also might be placing things in unusual places. They might be putting their keys in the refrigerator. I had a gentleman I worked with one time whose wife always put the remote for the TV in the microwave. Things like that just don't make any sense. That's a red flag. Decreased or poor judgment. Again, there are times I don't make good decisions. I might let my car go too long before I get the oil changed, and that's a bad decision on my part. Poor judgment, poor decision. But when you think about poor judgment with a person with Alzheimer's or dementia, I think about someone getting scammed. I can tell you a story about a woman with dementia who she got a call. I've told this several times. Some of you may have heard it if you've heard me talk about this before, but she got a call and said, "You've won from Publishers Clearinghouse. You've won $10,000. But to get your $10,000, you need to send us $1,000. Well, that makes no sense to us, right? But she didn't have that judgment to understand that. So she sent the $1,000. Well, guess what they did? They called back the next week. They said the same thing. She didn't remember they had said the same thing. They got another $1,000 out of her until they probably got close to $8,000 out of her before her family realized what was going on. So things of that nature. Withdrawal from work or social activities. Many times people, especially in the early stages of dementia, they realize they're having difficulty with those things like remembering names or remembering how to do something. They may just kind of start staying away from their normal activities. And then changes in mood or personality. We're all in a bad mood sometimes, right? We all get mad. We're all just sometimes have anxiety or in a bad mood. But this is different. People may have a real personality change that you notice about them. And so again, what I would urge you all to do is just understand that these are warning signs. Even if you see one of these in yourself or somebody else, it doesn't mean you have Alzheimer's or dementia. It's a sign that you need to have a conversation with your physician about what you're worried about so that you can begin figuring out why these things are happening. Is it normal? Is it a new medication that's being taken? Is it what's happening that could be causing this? Now, Why is it important for the early detection of Alzheimer's or dementia? We just talked about it's important to pay attention to changes. We've already talked about if you see changes, take action by having the conversation with a doctor or a trusted family member or friend. But also it's important because it helps to plan for the future. And if a person can get diagnosed early, they can start helping to be part of those discussions for the future and making those plans for the future. Exploring treatment options that we'll talk about here in a minute. And then obviously be able to participate in clinical studies, which are also very important. So there are a number of reasons why early detection is important. I will say for me, the number one reason is now knowing that there are some new drugs out there. Leqembi is what the drug that's being used right now is called. We expect another one to be approved at the end of July called donanemab. And these are the first drugs that change the disease progression. So we're not curing it yet, we're not preventing it yet, but we now have new drugs to change the disease progression. But what that means is people have to get diagnosed and talk to their physicians very early for these drugs to be effective. It has to be Alzheimer's specific. There has to be testing to make sure that there is the amyloid plaque buildup in the brain, because what these new drugs do, they're called monoclonal antibodies. They actually go in and attack these bad amyloid beta in the brain and start clearing them out. And what that does, when we can start clearing away that bad amyloid beta protein that's collecting in the brain, we're able to see research and studies and clinical trials have shown we can significantly slow down the progression of that disease. Think about that. If you are an employer on here and you're worried about, you want your employees to know about this, because you can have a great employer. Maybe they're having a little bit of mild cognitive impairment. And if they will go ahead and talk to their physicians, and if they are appropriate for this medication, just think of how many, they could get 10 more years before they progress. That's 10 more years of being able to be an employee and engaged and continuing to provide value for that company. Or if you're on here and you're an employee and you're worried about it, think about if you qualify for this medication, you are going to be able to work and plan and have more years to do that. And that is so important. We do know that there are also non-drug options to help treat symptoms. We know, we'll talk about those in a minute. We do know that the way we live our lives does make a difference. So health and wellness is very important. 40% of dementia cases may never happen if people would take on certain lifestyle initiatives that I'll show you a slide on in a minute. And so we are in a wonderful, exciting time around treatment. And so we really want people to understand the disease, understand the importance of early detection. But let's look real quick about how this disease does impact families, because this is going to impact the workplace, because families, caregivers are impacted. Approximately 2/3 of caregivers are women. Now, I just told you earlier that women are more likely to have the disease, and now we're hearing that women are more likely to be caregivers. So it really is a women's disease. It really does affect women in many ways. We know that caring for someone with Alzheimer's can take a physical, an emotional, social, and financial toll on families. In fact, 70% of the expenses of the lifetime cost of caring for someone with dementia is borne by families, usually out of pocket or through long-term care expenses. 83% of the help provided to an older adult with dementia in the US comes from family members, friends, or unpaid caregivers. And that care could be valued at over $271 billion. It's really hard to get insurance help with dementia care. And there's a lot of reasons for that we won't go into today. So it really does, the help, the care, the financial burden really does come from the family. And then again, compared with caregivers of people with dementia, With people without dementia, twice as many caregivers of those with dementia indicate substantial emotional, physical, and financial difficulties. So it really is, while caregiving for anyone is difficult, caring for someone with dementia can be even more stressful and financially draining. So who are caregivers? Again, 2/3 are women, a third of those are daughters. 1 in 3 caregivers is age 65 or older. A quarter of the dementia caregivers are in that sandwich generation. So they're caregivers that are taking care of an aging parent and a child, and probably potentially working as well. 41% of caregivers have a household income of $50,000 or less. We just talked about how difficult it is to get assistance, financial assistance, respite assistance when you're caring for someone with dementia. And 66% of caregivers live with the person in the community. So that person with dementia is living in their home. Just to throw this out there, there are more than 1 million additional direct care workers that are going to be needed between 2021 and 2031 when this report came out. More new workers than any other single occupation in the US. So we need more direct care workers in the workforce caring for people with dementia. So even if we had all the money in the world, we had all this, everyone had the money they needed to pay for care, there's not enough people in the workforce to provide that care. So that's, another issue to think about as well. So I don't want to run into Kara's time too much, but let's now look at the impact of Alzheimer's in the workplace. So what does that mean for the workplace? Well, 18% of caregivers had to go from full-time to part-time or cut back hours. They needed to be there with their person, and maybe they couldn't afford or pay for someone or find someone to come in and help them. 9% of caregivers had to give up work entirely. 57% of employed caregivers come to work late, have to leave early, or take time off due to caregiving demands. 83% of care at home is provided by family, friends, or other unpaid caregivers. We just talked about that. We also talked about how women are more likely than men to perform those caregiving tasks, which often compete with their responsibilities, such as employment. And 6% of caregivers retire early. Again, a quarter of the caregivers are in that sandwich generation. 6 in 10 caregivers were employed in the last year, and they worked an average of 35 hours per week. So you can see how this impacts what's happening in the workplace. What caregivers are going through is impacting their ability in the workplace. Just another slide on work effects of caregiving. What's new on here? 18% had to go from full-time to part-time, 9% had to quit work, 7% lost their job benefits. Wow, can you imagine being a caregiver and because of having to change the way you work or your job, you lost your job, you lose your benefits. And then 8% had to turn down a promotion. So it really does have an effect on employers and employees. So what can employers, what can companies, what can you do as a boss to help make a difference in the community or in your work community? And the first thing I would say is that we want to be an organization that values employees' wellness and work-life balance and social responsibility. I mentioned earlier that the science just tells us that we can increase key healthy habits to lower the risk of cognitive decline and possible dementia. It's never too late, it's never too early to start making these choices. And what are those choices? Well, keeping our brain challenged. That works well if we can keep people in the workforce. We want to get people moving right. We want to get people eating right. We want to have people maintaining a healthy weight, controlling their blood pressure, and managing their diabetes. So as an organization, perhaps making sure people are allowed that time they need to make their doctor's appointments and to make sure that their health overall is managed well. Giving people information about why it's important to protect their head, why sleep is important, and being smoke-free. So we know that if we can take charge of our brain health, as I mentioned before, potentially 40% of all dementia cases could be prevented. But we even know if there are people in those early stages, let's say they don't qualify for that new medication I mentioned, we know that putting some things in place for their brain health can actually slow down the progression as well. So supporting your employees, giving them education about taking charge of their brain health, making that a part of their wellness can be very important. So just overall enhancing your wellness program. The other thing is just letting your employees, letting your friends, your staff, your coworkers know that the Alzheimer's Association is here to help. So there is help when people are thinking about strategies. There's help when people want to find out what resources are available in their community. There's help when they want to learn about respite care and how to maybe apply for some respite money that we have through the state of Arkansas. We can do that through the Alzheimer's Association. So just letting your people know about our helpline and the things that we're able to provide, and it's free of charge, as well as our free education and support. Another great opportunity for caregivers are support groups. So knowing that they have the ability to join a support group. So maybe allowing them to take that time at lunch to be a part of that support group, or giving them that permission again to take that time, or letting them know of the virtual support groups that exist. And we actually have one starting soon that's going to be in the evening, and I hope that is one where working caregivers are able to get to that virtual evening support group, because that's so important. And then finally, as an organization, let your employees who are caregivers or who have some kind of connection to Alzheimer's dementia know that it means something to your business. Start a team for our Walk to End Alzheimer's. Have an educational program or community listening session. Share our resources with associates, neighbors, friends. Let us come in and present. Let us provide our online education that's free, so people know how to access it. So lots of ways that organizations, employers can help to show these caregivers who we know now are struggling, and what they're struggling with can help support them. And again, our Walk to End Alzheimer's, that is our largest fundraiser. It's a great way for companies and communities to come together and show their support. Maybe help rally around somebody that they know is a caregiver or experiencing dementia. We have 5 throughout the state. And again, this just really helps fuel our mission. And not only is our Walk to End Alzheimer's, really what those funds go to is to be able to provide not only towards the research that's happening around the disease, but to allow us to provide that free care and support that we do. So that's a really quick look at Alzheimer's and dementia, and a really quick look at how it affects the workplace. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Kara, and then we'll take any questions when she's finished.
Thank you so much, Jill. I have to say, I personally always learn so much from these Alzheimer's Association presentations. And I'm kind of constantly reminded about the differences and the causes of Alzheimer's and dementia. So it's just really valuable information. I am going to work on sharing my screen here. And we will get started.
Yeah.
Can you guys see the presentation?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay.
Yes.
Wonderful. So for those that may have missed us at the beginning, my name is Kara, and I am representing the BBB today. And this is a cause that is close to my heart because I was a caregiver for my grandmother up until she passed last November. And she dealt with a fair amount of cognitive decline. So I'm familiar with how hard this can be for individuals and caregivers and employers and employees, because at the BBB, we see a lot of people dealing with bad businesses or encountering scams from people who are in these stages of cognitive decline. So we always love to partner with the Alzheimer's Association on these important topics. And to get started, I always like to talk a little bit about the BBB and what we do, especially when we have a mixed audience like this. So I will just dive right in. Oh, I jumped us all the way to the end. Sorry. Okay. I don't know why we're not getting the page. Hold on just a second. I might have to stop my screen share too. Bear with me just a second. Okay, I've got it. Hopefully we don't have to keep doing that. Okay, so about the Better Business Bureau. BBB is a nonprofit organization, and we serve the entire state of Arkansas with the exception of our border residents in Miller and Crittenden counties. The BBB's primary function is to be an advocate for consumers and a resource for businesses. We promote trust and good transactions in the marketplace. A branch of our Better Business Bureau is also our BBB Education Foundation that provides educational programs like this to businesses and consumers throughout the state. Our mission is to be the leader in advancing marketplace trust, and our vision is a marketplace where buyers and sellers trust each other. So, in short, we want to see both businesses and consumers thrive because consumers do better financially when they interact with good businesses and avoid scams, and businesses tend to do better financially when they are trusted providers. So, how do we fulfill that mission? What makes a trustworthy marketplace? For us, we offer a wide range of services to both businesses and consumers in the hopes of developing smart consumerism and trusted businesses. So, some of the items that make a trusted marketplace are shown on the screen. And what they boil down to in terms of BBB services is scam tracking and awareness, business education and resources, public outreach to consumers from school aged all the way to older adults, free resources for consumers on bbb.org, including our BBB profiles. You guys may be familiar with ratings and reviews online. And then we also provide advertising reviews for both businesses and consumers to ensure that there is a fair advertising structure in the state. So enough about us. We can get to the meat of our portion of the presentation today, which is part of the impact that Alzheimer's and dementia has on our workforce and employers. So today I would like to focus on the economic impact of these issues, fraud risks associated, some preventative measures that employers can take to avoid fraud, and support resources. So we'll get started with the economic impact. And, the aging workforce is not a new topic, but today's version is a little different than what employers may be used to. People are working later in life, and the number of people diagnosed with Alzheimer's and dementia is growing, as Jill said. We know that older adults bring value and experience to the workforce. So we want to protect those age groups and provide for them as much as possible. But oftentimes, those dealing with these diseases may not feel comfortable coming forward to their employers, or they may not know that they're dealing with cognitive decline. Another point to highlight that Jill also touched on is in the workforce now, we have baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and now Gen Z. So, millennials and baby boomers are the largest generations in the US. So, what you will see as employers and may already be seeing are millennials and Gen X caring for that baby boomer generation and so forth. And that is just going to continue to swap hands. And I say that because many of the impacts highlighted in our presentation not only apply to those directly dealing with Alzheimer's and dementia, but also their caregivers. So, one impact to organizations can be increased costs from errors. And these errors could stem from mental decline or even burnt out caregivers. So, issues like billing errors, data entry, or failure to follow normal procedures or customer service procedures. Some things you could also see are higher absenteeism and turnover rates. Both dementia and caregiving responsibilities can result in these higher absences because of appointments and other needs. And then we have decreased productivity or performance as another potential issue. Cognitive impairments can reduce efficiency and accuracy. And the same could be said for caregivers who are stretched thin. There can also be costs associated with accommodations and support. Stuff like flexible work schedules or modified tasks can cause an upheaval for departments and managers. And then finally, we have increases costs associated with health benefits, since those dealing with cognitive issues and their caregivers may require, excuse me, more significant medical care and get more significant medical costs. So moving on to some of the additional risks, and this is kind of a growing field because of all of the technology that we deal with every day, and that is the fraud and cybersecurity concerns. As our workforce ages in general, we're seeing more and more challenges with technology and fraud. So scams are becoming more advanced and technology is becoming more advanced. And when you couple that, excuse me, with cognitive challenges, there is a real liability for organizations and an incentive to make training a priority. So some examples include susceptibility to phishing attacks, accidental sharing of information. You may have some mismanagement of security credentials, failure to recognize cybersecurity threats, and especially for older individuals, the inadvertent participation in fraud, which is common in the older age groups. And I do want to point out, though, that these risks are not limited to our older population or those dealing with cognitive issues. This really applies to the entire workforce. No business, no matter the size, is 100% safe from fraud activity. But knowing what we know about the aging workforce and enhanced technologies, it is important to discuss best practices with your teams and just make sure that cybersecurity measures are intact. So, what are some actionable items that we can take to prevent fraud in our organizations and support the aging workforce and their caregivers? So first things first, training, awareness, training on cybersecurity, recognizing the red flags of fraud and best practices for technology use. And on another page, awareness on being conscious of and supportive of those who may be dealing with cognitive decline, and even training on recognizing it in yourself and others. Next, implementing controls and monitoring tools can help. It doesn't have to be a big brother situation in your workplace, but this is your business and you do have to protect it. So one simple thing you can do to protect your business today is enable multi-factor authentication on your protected accounts. So a cyber expert in one of our recent cybersecurity summits stated that this one simple step can thwart 99% of cyber attacks, and it's free. And this is something you can do in your home as well. If you have people that are dealing with cognitive decline in the home, which makes it challenging to sign in, that I do recognize and have dealt with. But also just in your own life, adding that two-step authentication, that multi-factor authentication can really go a long way in protecting you from cyber threats, and it's free. Some other things that you can do is implement routine audits of your cyber health. And many companies are starting to do phishing tests where they send out emails to employees at random to see if they'll bite or if more training is needed. Another thing to consider is dual approvals for financial transactions. This is something that can help on both fronts, the fraud side and the cognitive issues. This is just a safe step to ensure that two eyes are on those financial transactions within your organization. And finally, this is geared more towards those dealing with medical issues and their caregivers, but flexibility and support can go a long way in the workplace. And honestly, if you're not having the conversation about flexibility and support in your office, it may be time, because the newer generations of the workforce are looking for that flexibility and support regardless of medical status. But especially when folks are dealing with medical problems, or they have children or parents or both with medical issues, things like flexible scheduling, task modifications and employee assistance programs can go a long way. In addition, developing a supportive environment towards these issues will be beneficial to organizations and their employees. We know a lot of organizations say that we are like a family, but what we know, unfortunately, is often employees don't feel that way. So, having an open ear and an outlet when employees are dealing with these issues can go so far in reducing turnover and employee loyalty. It can also help you as an organization know what steps you need to take with these team members. Another step you can take, prepare yourself and your team with access to resources, counseling services, and even caregiver support, aligning yourself with organizations like the Alzheimer's organization. And to add to what Jill said, health and wellness programs may help employees prevent Alzheimer's and other diseases in the first place. So this is just one more thing that organizations can consider to extend the health and life of their teams. So really just to wrap it all up, we have some resources and support out there. Speaking of support, there's a lot of it out there. The Alzheimer's Association, as we know, tons of resources. I even found an organization or a micro pay site on the Alzheimer's Association website specifically geared towards employers and professionals. So there's just a wealth of resources out there. The Better Business Bureau has all sorts of resources for employers regarding fraud and for older adults. Family Caregiver Alliance, the National Institute on Aging, AARP has an employer resource center. So there's really just a lot of resources and support out there, and it would be good to align yourself and your organizations with those organizations. And I may be stuck again, but to wrap it up, and I can give you guys our contact information. The last slide was contact information. I just want to say thank you to the team at the Alzheimer's Association and all of you for joining us today. BBB's contact information was supposed to be on the screen, but I can provide that to you guys in the chat. And we encourage you guys to stay connected with us for more on these issues, and also business content if you're interested, consumer awareness tips, and just so much more. But other than that, I will just turn it back to Jill for our Q&A round.
Thanks, Kara. I just want to build on what Kara said. We think about potential issues, people working later in life. And we know that age is the greatest risk factor for dementia, and people are working later. So being aware of those signs and symptoms and those warning signs, potential issues you might see that are warning signs in the workplace, maybe around those errors and decreased productivity. And I just think it's important to think about being willing to ask those questions to find out if it's something going on with that individual, or are they now caring for somebody and they're having this caregiver stress. Because there is such a stigma around dementia and Alzheimer's that people don't want to talk about it or admit it, and just trying to be a safe place for them to be able to talk about it, I think is important. And also, I love what you said, Kara, about the younger generation really looking for that flexibility and support as they are in the workplace, in the workforce. Because if they are a caregiver, if they're in that sandwich generation, that's what they need, and to help build that loyalty and to decrease that turnover. And I think that's what most everybody wants, is that loyalty and decrease that turnover rate. Does anyone have any questions for either me or Kara at this point?
While we're waiting, I'm going to put BBB's contact information in the chat.
Okay, yeah. So I would ask you all, have you can answer in the chat, or you can feel free to unmute yourselves, but are you seeing this where you are and where you work with employees as either having the disease or caring for someone, and how is that affecting their work? Anyone have any thoughts on that?
Well, I know one thing that we are seeing at the Better Business Bureau is an increase in these cybersecurity threats, but also breaches. So we keep seeing this not just from large organizations, because this happens to small businesses as well and medium-sized businesses. And honestly, they're less able to handle the situation and they're less prepared on the front end as well, a lot of times. And when you're dealing with, and this goes for really young into the workforce and people that are older in the workforce, they're just not always as trained on protecting themselves and their organization from these cyber threats. And when you think about it, a lot of us work half of the time from our phones, or we are doing things after hours, and it's so much easier to intermingle our personal lives and devices with our work lives and devices. So we're just seeing more ways that organizations are being infiltrated with cyber risks and cyber threats because of all of these moving pieces and people aging in the workforce and younger adults not really knowing how to protect themselves from fraud. And it's just a whole lot going on in that space.
Yes. Let's see, we had Mary says we currently have employers taking care of their family member parents suffering dementia. Yes, the support resources you provide will give them more options to provide better care. So I'm glad, Mary, that that's going to be beneficial to your team and the employees that you have, because I think that will help with that. You know, that loyalty, that support, just seeing that you support them and understand what they're going through as well. You know, the other, you know, I love this idea and what's happening now with, and you say it better than I do, Kara, because that's your space, but you know, these dual you know, logins, you know, having two identification logins and those kind of things, because that could be a red flag too. If you haven't, if that's something your company does and all of a sudden that becomes a problem for somebody, or they can't figure out how to do it, you know, what's behind that? Because that is something that could be a challenge for someone with the disease. Maybe they could still manage the one login, but to have the two identification login, you know, things like that people can be aware of in the workforce, that there could be something going on and could be a problem.
Yeah, that two-factor authentication is really important these days. And I was so shocked when the cyber experts were giving us this data on how much it can protect you, because I shouldn't say this, but I am one of the last people to enable multi-factor logins on my accounts, because it's just, you know, we're always on the go. We just want to sign in and get in and do what we're doing. And it really is a pain. And then when you're talking about those that may be dealing with cognitive decline, and even just in general, older adults, I know my grandmother a lot of times had problems signing into things, and me and her would go back and forth and change passwords and sign into things. And it really can cause a lot of trouble. But when you do enable that multi-factor step, it's so much more protective of your information or your organization's information. And a lot of times, even our kids' information, because I know on my phone, I have all sorts of stuff stored for my kids, or information about my dad or my grandparents. So it's just important to think about how we're using that information and how to protect ourselves.
Yes, yes.
And I had a question, and I know I've asked this before, but maybe other people on the call are wondering too. One thing, and this is a little bleak, but I am wondering the mechanism. How does actual Alzheimer's cause death? I guess I'm not really putting the pieces together as to why something that causes this cognitive decline would cause someone to pass away.
That's a very good question. And it really has to do with the changes in the brain that affect maybe the ability to swallow. And you know, eventually the changes in the brain affect one's ability to breathe, perhaps to swallow. And so it may be something else. They may get pneumonia because they're unable to breathe correctly as the disease gets in the later stages. And a lot of times the ultimate cause is the brain change, the dementia, right? And so that's kind of how it leads to, or it has to the decrease in their mobility might lead to the death, but the ultimate cause is the dementia. That's what's causing the decrease in the mobility or the inability to swallow or those kinds of things.
That makes sense.
And that's why a lot of times I think the numbers are higher than people even realize, because a lot of times, on a death certificate or something, they may say failure to thrive as the reason for death, say, but really the failure to thrive was due to their Alzheimer's and cognitive decline. So
Well, I did at least have, go ahead. I'm sorry, Jill.
well, I was just gonna say, so we think about, we have numbers and we have, even when we say there are 7 million Americans nearly living with Alzheimer's, and I neglected to say there are 60,000 people in Arkansas with Alzheimer's and dementia. Those are just the cases we know about. Those are the cases that are reported. We know that so many people never get diagnosed. So I believe the numbers are even greater than that in the number of people with the disease.
Wow, that's huge. And one of the questions that I had when we were talking about, doing walks and stuff, and maybe I saw that Jennifer Sanchez commented that she's the team captain for her walk team at work. So one of
Awesome.
you guys, when is the next walk and where? And
So we have 5 walks around the state. We have the Central Arkansas Walk is our last walk. It's November the 9th at Argenta Plaza. We have one in Northwest Arkansas that will be in September. I don't have the date right in front of me, but that'll be at a venue probably in Rogers. That's still to be determined, but that'll be September. We have another one in September that will be in the Fort Smith area at the University of Arkansas Fort Smith campus. And then we have one that's going to be September the 10th. So a lot going on in September. No, I'm sorry. It's going to be October the 10th in El Dorado at the university there in El Dorado. So you can find all of those on our website if you're interested in a walk, or reach out and we can tell you more about them and how to get involved.
yeah, I just think those are very cool and kind of a first step for getting your organization involved in learning more about cognitive decline and the things associated on an organization level and also on a personal and family level.
Well, and the walks are great because not only are you there as a team, it's a team experience. If you do have someone there who's a caregiver for someone with dementia, you're showing your support for them. And there's always educational materials there that people can benefit from. And then there's also tons of other organizations there where you might get some other resources.
Very cool.
Yeah. Thank you all for being here. I want to thank you as well for coming and listening to this information. And like I said at the beginning, I hope you, no matter what drew you to this conversation today, I hope you were able to take something informative and helpful away from it.
Yes, thank you so much. And please feel free to reach out to Jill or myself if you want more information or have questions following the presentation. We just appreciate you guys being here. I do see a question came in. Celeste asked, are there CEUs for, I'm guessing this presentation, Celeste? If so, no. And I don't know, we at the BBB, we offer some courses that do have CEUs, and I don't know about the Alzheimer's Association. I wouldn't want to speak on that, but that's possible on there too.
Yeah, if you're in healthcare and looking for CEUs, there's some opportunities through our Essentials program, which you can reach out and ask me about, or look online for Essentials, ESSENTIALZ, Essentials. I'll write it in here real quick. So that's an opportunity for CEUs through our online program. All right. If there aren't any other questions, thank you all for being here. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.